us about your delivery story.
My water broke at home, and I called in and told them at the hospital that my water broke, and they told me to come in, and they thought that I could be there probably weeks because I didn't have any contractions at the time. I was only 26 weeks at the time, so we thought I'd be there for a while and I'll have the babies later, and this was going to be our life for a few weeks. So that lasted for a while. They monitored me and they made sure that, there was no activity, and nothing really did show up, and they gave me a little more freedom while I was still, in the hospital, and they started letting me have showers, and I thought, getting comfortable in the NICU. Then that was on a Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then by Friday morning, something was a little different. I was cramping, and I had been cramping the whole time, but I was cramping a little bit more, and my nurse came in. She was preparing to leave for the day. It was that morning. They had shift change, and I told her I was cramping, and she said, okay, well, I'll check back in on you, and she walked away. I went to the bathroom, and when I went to the bathroom, it felt different, and I was in a lot of pain, and I reached down and I felt my baby's head. And when I felt her head, the first thing I did was think about how to push her out, and I did. I pushed her out and I caught her, and then I pulled a chain, and the nurse came back in, and I was holding my baby. Now, I was pregnant with triplets, so there was still 2 more babies in there, and we had to go through the process of delivering those 2. So we did, and they rushed me off. After they took that baby, they rushed me off to the OR to have a C-section, so we thought. But when I got in the room, the second baby had dropped. So baby B's down. They're like, okay, baby B's down, push. So still no pain medicine, nothing, and I'm pushing out the second baby. So then after I pushed that baby out, he wanted to try for the third one vaginally instead of doing the C-section. So that's what we did, and I pushed the third baby out. And they were all here.
Could you tell us about your NICU story?
So they were born at 26 weeks, 6 days. My girls came out and they had bubble CPAP, and they were doing really well. Everybody was sure that they probably were further along than what they really were. And my son was drastically different. He was a kid that was on a ventilator. They couldn't get him stabilized. It was a lot of what's going on. Is there an infection even? We just couldn't nail it down. So he was really sick, and there was some times where they, didn't know if he was going to make it. That first day, they came in and told me, he's had a rough day. We just don't know what he's going to do. So this is the brand new world of the NICU, and I didn't even get a day before my roller coaster started. It was off at the beginning. I got like the worst news you could get is we don't know if he's gonna make it. So he started to get better over time. They changed his settings, and he stabilized, and from there, you go through a little honeymoon phase, and you feel like, okay, I can do this. Things are going to get better, and we're not going to go back through that roller coaster again. But that's not how it happened. So we found out he had reflux. It took us 3 months to figure that out, because he was dropping little bits of his feeds down into his lungs. So he would crash and come back, and no one could figure out. But because he was so weird in the beginning, no one knew what was going on with this kid. So there were several times that we got told, we don't know if he's going to make it. They would have his oxygen settings on 100, and he'd be on a ventilator, but yet his saturations would be 85. So they're like, if he drops, we can't give him any more than 100%. That's the most we can possibly give. So we hung out around him during those times, and we tried to make sure that we took care of ourselves as much as we could and our other kids. Because I also have a child that was at the time 3 years old, and then I had just had the triplets, and my husband was trying to work, and I'm trying to get to see the babies after I was discharged. And my husband's trying to see them, and then we're trying to juggle life with a 3-year-old at home. So it was hectic, and the thing that I remember the most was trying to make sure that no matter what anybody said at any moment, my baby was going to live. They told me the worst news and I'd laugh at them. They thought I was crazy, and I know it. But that's what I had to do to get through that moment. I couldn't look them in the eye and believe what they were saying, because that meant my baby wasn't going to be here. So I made sure that on the worst days, I would go to my board and I would write, that first birthday party is going to be awesome, or something to get me through the moment and to think about the future. And I would hold my baby and I'd tell them stories and I'd read things to them when they would allow me to hold. And just anything that helped me to cling to the fact that they were going to be here. I went home, I bought their first outfit, I hung it on their beds. Everything that you would normally do, I kept going through the motions, and I probably did more of that during those times when I wasn't sure. I needed the reassurance. But truly, I learned how to parent while I was in the NICU. I can say I learned how to advocate for my babies. There were times where I had to ask questions. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand. But I made sure I asked the questions until I did, and I made sure to ask several people. I didn't just take it from one person. I'd ask several people, and the people who knew my baby the most, my bedside nurses and people who had had my babies, hands on my babies more than once or twice, I made sure I would ask them, what do they think? What was it? What does that mean? And what questions should I ask? And I would always researching, but not on the internet. I had to let go of the internet. I did try it one time. I went on the internet and I lost it because the internet told me my baby was going to die. And so here I am again getting bad news, putting myself through it, when if it was going to happen, there was nothing I could really do about it. So I had to let go of the internet, and I had to make sure that I got my information from the people who knew my baby and not from a source that was just giving me information off of nothing. Because each baby's different. So this same thing could be diagnosed on my baby, and it could be one way, and it could be diagnosed on another baby, and it could be totally different. So it means a lot to be able to have someone that's laying eyes on your baby to give you your information. And that's another thing that I loved learning while I was here, because before that, all I had was the internet. But here you have the support of your doctors and of your staff, and they're able to give you information. So I really did utilize that. And I just really made friends with the nurses. A lot of them now, even 3 years later, a lot of them now are still very close, and they know what's going on with my babies, and they're seeing them grow up. And they are at their birthday parties, and it is a bond that I can never explain to anyone unless you go through it, because we did not know any of them, but they had our most prized possessions every single day, and they knew them like we did. The baby could move a certain way, and they're like, oh, the baby just wants this, and they would adjust it, and the baby would be back calm again. And they taught me those things, and I was able to parent better because of it.
How long was your NICU stay with triplets?
So my girls were here 2.5 months, and my son was here 4.5 months. So with my girls, they did get home before their due date, and that's usually what they tell us, is that our babies will get home by their due date. But my son, he went past his due date. So that was really hard. That was during the time of Mother's Day. So we had Mother's Day and the baby wasn't home. And then we had, Easter was okay because they were still little and I knew they couldn't come, but by the time we hit Mother's Day, they were big plump kids that looked like they should be at home, yet I couldn't bring him home because he still wasn't able to eat, and he still wasn't able to get down to a low enough setting of oxygen. So he was here, but it was 4.5 months of NICU life.
What was your going home story like?
So my girls went home within 2 days of each other. So I took the first one home. I got adjusted to having one baby at home, and then 2 days later we went back and got another baby. And then a couple months later we went and got the third baby. So I had a transition, and I was able to not just have them all come home at once. But I can say when my son came home, he came home on oxygen. He also had a G-tube. He was on 7 different medications, so we were around the clock giving medications at whatever time and trying to keep that medication schedule, trying to keep the feeding schedule, and still trying to function ourselves. So early on, it was really difficult. We were exhausted, and we were scared. Probably for about a month, my husband slept on the couch next to my son that was on oxygen because we just didn't want to leave him. Yes, he had a monitor, so we were still hearing our beeps at home, but there was still so much going on with him that we were still terrified. But yet, we were at home caring for a baby with all of those things. So we had specialist visits, and then over time, we got rid of our G-tube, we got rid of our oxygen, we got rid of all the medication, and we started entering the world of therapy. So we had physical therapy, we've had speech therapy, we've had developmental therapy, we've had occupational therapy throughout our course over the last few years. I think a lot of it stopped somewhere around 2 years old was when we were kind of able to kind of let go of a lot of it. We still do speech therapy with one of my daughters once a week, but everything else at 3, everything else is done. But there was the process of dropping this thing this month, and a few months later we drop another thing to get us there. And the thing that got me through it was hoping that we would get to a place where we did not have to have any of it. So I felt like the more I could do early, the less it would hurt later. So I never said no to any therapy. If they said the baby needed it, I said okay. And I had people in my house all the time, and I was sick of them. I wanted them to go home, and I wanted my family to myself. But I had to sacrifice in the beginning to get to the point where we are now, and I do it all over again.
Is there anything you're still coping with after the NICU?
I still remember things that I didn't get to do. So when I see all those pictures of those babies that are being taken, those newborn photos, we did ours, but it was staggered. And we didn't get that newborn picture of me just holding a little baby without any oxygen tubes, or that wasn't, a little bit smaller. I didn't get to do that. I still wish that I had gotten in that wheelchair when I was taking my baby out of the hospital. I wish I had gotten in the wheelchair and rolled out like everybody else with my balloons hanging around the back of my wheelchair. So I think thinking about those things emotionally, I make sure now to tell people to do it. So if you get that chance, or ask for it if you want to do it, so that you don't have those regrets later. So if it's something that you see that you want to do, make sure you mention it, because you still think about it even years later when you see somebody else go through it, because you know what they're feeling. You're like, you could have done it. Why didn't you ask? And I guess also, you go through this period of people asking you how old your kid is, and at some point they may start to look like the other kids, but they were early, so we're still adjusting their age, and they don't get the adjustment, and they don't understand preemie life. So that was hard at some points, was, how old's your kid? And I'm like, do I tell them the story or do I not? And now at this point, I don't really have to tell them the story because people can't see the difference. But early on, that was something that I had to cope with because I didn't know what to say. So I had to play it by ear. Sometimes I told a story, sometimes I didn't. Also, I think I'm still coping with the fact that there is a story. I can't just say I had a baby and I went home 2 days later. So there is still the thought process of the fact that there was something that happened. Do I bury it and never talk about it again, or do I use it? I'm choosing to use it instead of burying it, but it's still weird to have a story. Like, this should be simple, right? Everybody has a baby and goes home, but I have a story.
If you were going to give advice to a new NICU parent, what would you tell them?
Ask questions. Ask questions until you understand. Remember that it's your baby. Make sure you give the baths. Make sure you are there for the feedings. Do the things that everybody else is doing with their baby after they have them. Anything that would make it feel more like home, do it. So if you want to put a mobile on the bedside crib, put a mobile on there. If you want to play music, play music. We had Mozart playing in the background because somebody told me it helped his brain, so we did that. And talk about it. I would tell them to talk about it because there were so many things that I got from people by talking to them that saved me some heartache. Still had some, but I had less because I spoke to people who had been through it.